Good evening. I'm Marie Beam, CEO of Discovery Museum. And what you see behind me is our beautiful wheels accessible Discovery Treehouse, a great place to explore and learn. If you're tuning in from Massachusetts, I do hope you'll come visit. Welcome to the second event in the 2024 Discovery Museum Speaker Series, How to Have Brave Conversations That Build Empathetic Kids, with Dr. Valora Washington of the CAYL Institute. Thank you for joining us for this important and very timely conversation. A quick bit of housekeeping. Q&A will be open throughout the event. Please submit your questions anytime using the Q&A button, and we'll address as many as possible after Valora's presentation. Please use the chat button for any technical questions for the webinar host. Closed captioning can be turned on and off at the bottom of your screen. And finally, we are recording tonight's presentation. A link to the recording will be sent to all registrants once available. And we'll also send a resource list with any follow-up information referenced in the talk. I'm pleased to extend a special thank you to our speaker series sponsors. Tonight's event is free thanks to the loyal support of Enterprise Bank and Sutherland Realty Group, along with the other sponsors shown here. Their support has made this 12th year of the speaker series, always free and open to everyone, possible. And thank you, too, to those of you who made a donation when you registered for tonight's event. That's a big help. This year's speaker series theme is Conversation, Understanding, Hope. We've chosen to host conversations on topics that can be challenging for families, or for anyone really, to navigate. Our goal is that with the guidance of informed and insightful speakers, we can all gain a better understanding of these issues, and through that, a more hopeful perspective on the future and our ability to navigate it. The upcoming events on the schedule are shown here. Registration for all of them is open now on our website. And I'd like to especially highlight our presentation with Chanel Thurville, who will be our first ever artist in residence at the Discovery Museum, speaking with us about public art as an encouragement for inspiring civic engagement in our communities. We have guests from across the country with us tonight. So I'd like to briefly introduce our museum and our work to those of you who don't know us. Discovery Museum works to support kids and families by providing play-based learning programs that are rooted in science and nature. We create exhibits and programs that spark kids' natural creativity and curiosity, and that make learning fun. In 2023, we were able to grow our impact to new underserved audiences, continue on a path toward carbon neutrality, and work with our community partners to better reflect and serve a diverse community of interests and lived experiences. This year, we will work to evaluate how best to build upon a very solid foundation to understand, to expand the depth and breadth of our impact. We will be incorporating voices from across our community to find new ways to support and increase the number of partner organizations we work with, to deliver even more joyful learning experiences to kids and families. If you have ideas for how we can extend our impact, please reach out. We would love to hear from you. We are honored to host Valora for tonight's important conversation. Dr. Valora Washington is an internationally recognized authority in early childhood education. During her decade tenure as CEO of the Council for Professional Recognition, Dr. Washington advanced and professionalized the field of early childhood education with her leadership of the largest credentialing program for early educators in the United States, the Child Development Associate, or CDA, credential. Dr. Washington is considered a pioneer in early education, having been named as a legacy leader by the Center for Enhancing Early Learning Outcomes, for having shaped the early childhood education field, having a unique perspective on the history and context of today's policy initiatives, and for developing strategies to address the issues that impact child outcomes. She formerly served as vice president at Antioch College and the Kellogg Foundation, and as a tenured faculty member at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She's held leadership roles with the Massachusetts Governor's School Readiness Commission, Voices for America's Children, NAEYC, Black Caucus of the Society for Research in Child Development, National Head Start Association Commission on 2010, Boston Children's Museum, and Wheelock College. Valora, welcome. Thank you so much for being
Thank
with us
you.
tonight. We are honored to have your tremendous expertise and wisdom with us. And I'd just like to reiterate for our audience, what a difference you have made in the lives of children and families. You are truly an expert in every way. And thank you for guiding us this
Thank
week.
you. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. And let me get your slides going here
Okay,
for you.
very well. Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
want to say it is a tremendous pleasure for me to be here with you today, to really join with you in thinking together about why and how we can have great conversations that build empathetic kids. And what better place to have this conversation than at the Discovery Museum? Because museums are tremendous, powerful learning places. And so it's really appropriate that you are having these series of conversations about this topic and many other serious, important topics that face our children in our communities. Now, I think there's a little lag time with this computer, but we'll just keep moving on. So I'm really inspired to have this conversation with you tonight. And as I was thinking about this conversation, one thing that came to my mind was a quote from a rabbi who said, "If I am not for myself, who will be for me? But if I am only for myself, who am I?" I think this speaks to both bravery and it also speaks to our topic of empathy. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? Often it takes a lot of bravery to stand up for yourself, for children to stand up for themselves. But if I am only for myself, who am I? Very powerful quote. So, even when we don't realize it, there are a lot of messages around our children that the world is a pretty messy place. So no matter how hard we work to keep our children safe and to keep them free from all of these messages, it's pretty hard for somebody, even at 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, to stay away from messages of violence and incivility and harm. It's really hard for us to shield our children from all of these messages. And this is true now more than ever because our children, even from babyhood, have access to so many screens. And children are getting a lot of messages. They're getting messages about how humans are treating each other. They're getting messages about how humans are thinking about skin color and hair and language. But the good news of all of this is that because they're getting all these messages, it creates a lot of opportunity for us as the adults in their lives to engage in conversations with them, about what they're hearing, what they're seeing, what they're experiencing. Our children are relying on us, the trusted adults, to give them a sense of safety, to create it, to really help them interpret all these messages they're getting in the world. So too often when kids say things or they're curious about things, they say it maybe at times that feel inappropriate to us. I can remember my son very loudly in the grocery store making a comment about an outfit that another woman was making. And when kids say things, a lot of times our response is that we want to shush them. We want to silence them. That can feel like shaming to them. And we do that because we're inconvenienced, or sometimes we don't know how to respond, or we don't want the other person that they're referring to have hurt feelings. But what we're going to talk about tonight is how we don't have to shush kids. We don't have to shame kids. We don't have to silence kids. We can be inspired to step up to the plate and have brave conversations with kids, even when it's inconvenient for us. And that's what we're going to be doing tonight. So tonight we're going to be talking about how we're thinking about having brave conversations that build empathetic kids, why we want to have these conversations, what the question really means to be brave, to have empathy. We're going to talk about if young children are even really ready for these conversations and give some tips on how we might approach these conversations. And then ask the real question, which is, are we ready for this? And at the end of my talk, I'm going to drop into the chat a handout with some beginning resources that you can use to take this conversation even further if you want to explore it further. So let's start off by saying, why are we having these conversations? Why are we having these conversations? And so as we'll see later, kids are really getting a lot of messages. As I said, they're getting message about what's fair and what's unfair, differences in race and gender, and other kind of social constructs. That's why we're having these conversations. So I'm going to reference a lot of the work by Louise Thurman Sparks and her colleagues to really talk about 5 reasons why we need to have these conversations. And the first reason why we need to have these conversations is very simple. We need to respect children's intelligence. They see things, they're hearing things. And what we know from over 50 years of research is that very young children from 6 months old, 2 months old, 5 years old, are already perceiving not only concepts of fairness and unfairness, but also concepts about race, about gender, about handicapping conditions. They are seeing and perceiving this. They have a lot of knowledge about it. And not only that, do they see it? They also are picking up the social constructs that go with these ideas of race and gender and ability. So let's respect their intelligence. And that's a good reason why we want to have these conversations. Another reason we want to have these conversations is really to help children's social identities and their identities in their families. And that we can observe our children and make sure that they are really having the kind of social emotional development and development within our families that we want them to have. A third reason we can have these conversations is to really make sure that our children are getting accurate information. They're getting accurate information and appreciation about human diversity. So anybody who's been around little kids, especially in group settings, will have heard this example that some kid at some point looks at another kid's lunch and says, you know, that's really weird. Kids often call things weird. And, you know, when we hear that, we can give kids accurate information about it. We can say, that is curry. A lot of people eat curry. You know, I've tried it myself and I really like it. We can give them words for things, which is a fourth reason we want to have these conversations. When we give them words for the diverse experiences they come across, we're building their capacity to think critically about human diversity and what they're experiencing. We're giving them a vocabulary to talk about fairness and unfairness. And that's what we want to do. A fifth reason why we want to have this conversation is just simply that we want to be proactive with our children. Our children are picking up a lot of information, as I've said, and as I'm going to talk more about. And, you know, the best time to bring these topics up with our children is before they have them. Because before they even start expressing these things to us, they're seeing, they're hearing. So the best time is even before they bring it up. But the second best time is right now. So if you haven't brought it up, right now would be a good time to start thinking about bringing it up, being proactive person who is guiding your child's understanding of the world in important ways. That's why we want to have these conversations. We want to have these conversations because we know childhood has changed. There are many generations of people listening to this webinar tonight, but I can assure you that if we're all adults, the world our children is growing into is so different than the world we grew into. And one of the things that I've written about is the fact that we now have a generation of children called the Alpha generation, and there are big mega trends that are fundamentally changing the way childhood is happening for them. And so just briefly, some of these mega trends are these children are growing up in a United States of America where adults are going to outnumber children for the first time. That is going to shape their worlds in some fundamental ways. These children are growing up where there's a mega trend, where they're growing up in smaller families, more complex families, constantly evolving families. One child family and the step sibling are things that are becoming real demographic phenomena right now. I can remember when I was growing up, you would even hardly mention that somebody was divorced. Now, by the time kids are 6 years old, 30% of them have already experienced a change in their family structure because of death, marriage, remarriage, or something. And so their worlds have changed. Their engagement with technology is intense, starting from the time they are very, very, very young. And that's a talk for another day. These children are globally connected. They're exposed to a lot of things through screens. This is a diverse generation. This generation, for children under 10 in the United States, the majority of these children are already children of color. That is a fact that is not going to be changed. So we need to prepare all of our children to have empathy, to be ready to work in a world of people who are different than themselves, because they are going to be citizens of a nation where their generation, the majority of people will be people that are not like them. And so as adults, we know that this is a generation that's going to be differently educated because of online experiences, non-traditional certification options. These are mega trends that are influencing this generation. And these are reasons why we want to influence them by having these brave conversations and by teaching empathy. So then let's stop for a moment and say, what does it mean to be brave? What does it mean to have empathy? What do we really mean with these concepts? Let's think about that together. And so when we think about being brave is associated with the word called courage. Courage is from the Latin word cor, C-O-R. And the original definition of courage is that you speak your mind by telling your whole heart. And that's what we want to do with our children at an appropriate developmental level. We want to share ideas with them. We want them to be brave, and we have to be brave ourselves. And Maya Angelou says that, you know what, without courage, you can't practice any other virtue. But she says, courage is the most important virtue of all. She says, you can be kind for a while, you can be generous for a while, you can be just for a while, merciful, loving for a little while, but only with courage can you persistently be kind and generous and fair. So being brave is quite fundamental to what we're talking about tonight. I'm emphasizing being brave because having courage is something the research is strongly suggesting that many, many parents, and especially white parents, need to have more of. So what we find in a lot of research is that parents, especially white parents, are very, very reluctant to talk to their children about the courageous things that we need to talk with our children about. But as you've just heard me explain, when you look into the future that your child is going to be entering into, then you realize that you've got to prepare your children for that world which is a diverse world, that world which is going to require a lot of empathy and a lot of being able to put yourself in other people's shoes. And in order to help our children prepare for that world, we have to face our own discomfort or our own lack of knowledge. We have to talk to our children explicitly about difference, about race, about racism, about gender, all of these things. And so what research also finds is that parents of color are definitely more likely to be talking to their children about these issues. White parents are reluctant largely because they They're worried that they're going to say the wrong thing. They want to make sure that people believe they believe in equality, that they believe in the post-racial society. But what happens with this kind of approach is that it creates a vacuum of information for children, which leads them to absorb biases around them. And many of these biases are counter to the parents' own beliefs. I can't tell you how many times a white parent has said to me that they were shocked by something their child says, because children are picking up information from a lot of sources, and they need us to be brave and have conversations and guide them. Studies have shown that even when researchers have asked white parents to specifically talk about certain issues, the parents are very reluctant to do so. And the parents then turn to euphemisms like saying to the child, we should be nice to everybody, or we really care about everybody. These are vague platitudes that really are not instructive for children. And so we've got to move beyond that. And research has shown that unless white parents specifically talk to their children, that it is not having the impact that they think it is. So white parents, let's have more courage. On the other hand, a different kind of courage may be required for parents of color. Research, yes, shows that parents of color are much more likely to talk about race. More Black parents, 65%, 60% of Asians, 50% of Hispanics, 20% or more of whites will talk to their kids about these difficult issues. But a different kind of courage might be required because many of us as adults have experienced racial trauma. And a lot of us know a lot about discriminatory practices. We know about discrimination that has happened to us in housing. It's happened to us in education. It's happened to us in healthcare. It's happened to us in interaction with police and the criminal justice system. So we know a lot about racism. So it takes courage for us to talk with our children in a way that more highlights resilience. So everybody needs courage in this situation. Then let's move on to think about building empathy, because it takes courage to build empathy with our children. Plato said, I love this quote, he said, the highest form of knowledge is empathy because it requires us to suspend our egos and live in somebody else's world. It's the ability to understand and share the feelings of other people. I love that. Somebody else I want to cite, another resource for you tonight, is a woman named Michelle Borba. She wrote a book called The Unselfie. And she said, the problem with the selfie is that it puts yourself in the center of the world. And if we want kids to have more empathy, we need to have more unselfie. And she says low levels of empathy are rampant in our culture. And that's why we have so much bullying and cheating and weak moral reasoning and anxiety and depression. And she says we need more empathy and fewer selfies. So you might be thinking, even my 15-year-old isn't showing a lot of empathy. Well, empathy is a process that begins in early childhood, but it's also a lifetime growth opportunity. Those of us, if you've watched the news tonight, there are a lot of adults out there on television that still need to express more empathy. But as we often say, empathy is caught, not taught, and it is a process. So when and how are children developing empathy? How do they start to develop empathy? Well, there's a lot of milestones in empathy, and I want to refer you to 0 to 3 website, which is 0to3.org, to really look more at some of these milestones of empathy, because empathy really starts with how our children are connecting and feeling accepted by us during infancy. It helps them to feel secure. We also know that empathy happens when children start to understand that they are a separate person. around 6 months old, these children start doing social referencing. Social referencing is the reason why the preschool teacher tells you to go home and leave the child happily with a smile and don't linger. Because when the child is doing social referencing to you and you're hanging around looking anxious, giving 25 hugs to the kid, you're communicating to the kid that maybe this isn't a safe place to be after all. So that's an example of social referencing. By the time kids are 2 years old, they've developed a theory of mind and they start realizing they have their own thoughts and feelings. That's why they can say no. They have their own thoughts and feelings, and they realize that they have their thoughts, which are different from other people's thoughts. They also start to realize that there's common thoughts among humans. We all have happiness, we all have sadness. They start to realize that, things we can do to impact others. That's why some kids, you'll see them hugging each other if somebody's upset and so forth. So this is the development of empathy. And there's a lot of things that you can do to help your children develop empathy. One thing we can do is we can empathize with our child. A lot of times when I'm in the grocery store or somewhere, I hear people telling their kid, don't do this, don't do that. Or if the child is scared of something, like let's say a dog. One of the ways we can help show empathy is to say to our child, are you feeling scared of that dog? The dog is barking pretty loud. Let's hold hands until we walk by. We talk about feelings. We suggest how kids can show empathy. So, you know what? Your sister's sad because you snatched that toy away. Maybe we could give her another toy to play with. So we're modeling empathy and things we can do as we understanding that other people have feelings and that other people have reactions to what we're doing. So this goes on through childhood, through adolescence, that we're constantly learning more about how to take the perspective of other people. We're constantly learning this, and we have patience because it is a lifelong process. Empathy has a lot to do with how people perceive other people and how children are developing race awareness and social consciousness. I know a lot of us are still wanting to hold on to this idea that children don't see race, that they just love each other. But guess what? That is against 50 years of research that shows that children, they do see race, and they start seeing it at a very young age, because guess what? They're intelligent. By the age of 2, kids start to hear and absorb these messages about race. They start to hear and absorb stereotypes. By the age of 4, they're already putting labels on different groups and having thoughts about what causes a disability or different skin tones or gender. By 5, they know what it means to be one race or another. They know the social connotations of race. And by 6, 7, 8, they've gained a lot of information. By 9 and 10, a lot of their attitudes are solidified, and this continues on. This is why we have to be proactive with our children. This is why let's think about their futures. Let's not think about our past. And let's think that in the future, we're helping our children, we're raising children, we're teaching children to be in the 21st century, not the 19th and 20th centuries. Preparing children for the future. I love what Abraham Lincoln says. The best way to predict that future is to create it. So in my work, I've done all of these studies about the demographic realities and things that aren't going to change. But what can change is how we live out and live within those demographic realities. And that's what we can create. So let's think about how we can do this and how we can do this together. And there's lots of suggestions and things we can actually do. Number one, let's speak into the silence. Silence can hurt. Silence can really hurt. Silence robs children of vocabulary that they need to talk about and ask questions about what's troubling them. If you've ever been around children of color, even in the preschool, many children of color have already heard disparaging or confusing comments about their hair, about their names, about certain experiences. And silence hurts because silence requires them to figure it out on their own when they have such a limited understanding of the world all around us. Silence hurts. Silence teaches fear to all children because all children come to conclude that certain topics are so dangerous that even the adults are scared to talk about it. Silence forces children to rely upon other sources of information and not you. So they're picking up stuff from the internet, they're picking up stuff from screens, they're getting information from other children, from the television. They're not getting it from you. And a lot of information they pick up may be inaccurate, it may be stereotyped. You want to guide your children. You want to guide them. So an important way that you guide them is that you speak into the, and you also listen. Listening carefully is very important. And you listen without judgment or overreaction. Well, I had a chance to practice this recently with a great nephew of mine who was 7, who was telling me he thought I was pretty. And he was also suggesting that was kind of strange because I was dark-skinned. And you know, usually light-skinned Black people are prettier. And usually white people are even prettier than that. Remember, this is not a child I'm raising. This is another relative. It's important to listen without judgment, without overreaction, to find out what they know, to find out what they feel, to help them talk through these feelings, giving them opportunities to self-regulate. It's really important. Things that we hear from young children. Some of you know that recently the new movie came out, The Little Mermaid, and you realize that there was a lot of backlash because this little mermaid had an Ariel that was a person of color. And, you know, there was so much backlash about this fictional fish girl that even YouTube had to hide the dislike counter because they were bombarded with racist comments and 1.5 million dislikes. Let me tell you, this is a fictional character. Children, of course, heard this. We think they don't, but they do. And when they make these comments, again, it's an opportunity to find out what they heard. And also that opportunity to give them factual information according to their developmental level. To give children honest information in age and individually appropriate ways. Another thing we hear from young children, and that we heard a lot of in recent years, is children coming around using a term, China virus. China virus, and this idea of this virus being something that is Chinese in nature and that Asian people have this. And again, this is an opportunity for us to provide factual information. The coronavirus, COVID-19 affects people all over the world, all kinds of people. So we listen carefully. We ask questions. We respond with simple, straightforward answers, and we proceed in small steps, and we proceed over a lifetime. We also do something important as family members. We communicate our values. We want children to know where we stand. In our family, we do this. In our classroom, we behave this way. This is what's fair in our family. This is how we do fairness in our classroom. Really important. And we keep checking in with kids. This isn't a one and done conversation. You were brave, you had that one conversation, it's over. No, this is a lifetime of conversations. And because you started the conversation when the child was young, the child now trusts you to have that conversation. We can expect many conversations through childhood. We also want to provide our children with many opportunities for expression. Have you heard of this idea of giving our children windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors? This is an idea that was initially introduced by a woman named Emily Style, and then it got built upon by a woman named Rudine Sims Bishop. This idea of giving children windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. Mirrors are important because we want to give children opportunities to see themselves, to see characters like themselves, to experience their own culture, to feel pride in their own family. We want to give children mirrors to have those experiences. We also want to give children windows. We want to give them windows so they can peek into other people's experiences, so they can learn about the outer world, so they can see how other cultures and people with other abilities conduct their lives. We want to give them windows into those worlds. We can do that with books, with films. We can do that with taking our children to various cultural type festivals, lots of ways we can provide expressions for children. We also want to give our children sliding glass doors. Sliding glass doors give children more of an expansion and a personal experience with other people's cultures. Sliding glass doors helps them go into other people's experiences. One way that we do that for our children is we give them the gift of many cross-group friendships. This is really important. Research has demonstrated how important cross-group friendships really are. Research has demonstrated that when children have friends from different cultural, religious, ability groups, that they're less likely to show prejudice and discrimination toward those groups. And they've even done longitudinal studies, even with adolescents, that's showing that kids who have had cross-group friendships were less likely to develop certain kinds of biases. And while we're talking about cross-group friendships, I hope that you're being brave to have cross-group friendships of your own and making sure that you're, again, modeling and being that experience that you're showing for your children. That leads us to the question, are we ready for this? Are we ready to have these brave conversations? Are we ready to demonstrate empathy in situations where we encounter ideas about people and things that are different from what we typically experience? Can we let children know that there are people working on these various issues and so forth that they're concerned about at their own developmental level? We can facilitate brave conversations with other adults, with other parents, and we can facilitate these conversations with our children as well. What we don't want to do is we don't want to shush them. We don't want to silence them. We don't want to shame them. We don't want to do nothing. We're trying to make life better for this next generation. We're trying to come forward with courage, with commitment, with compassion. We are bringing knowledge and wisdom that we have. We're adults. We're not powerless in this situation. We can be game changers for these children, for these alpha children going into the 21st century. We can be architects of the change that they can experience in the way the United States of America is going to be. And we can have hope and express this hope with our children. So as I promised, we're dropping into the chat some resources that we hope that you will enjoy to continue the conversation, that this can become a movement among all of us as family members as we work with our children. Remember, Frederick Douglass says, power concedes nothing without a demand. And so we're giving that demand into the universe as we're creating these brand new children, these brave children, a generation of brave children who are showing a lot of empathy for other people in the world. Thank you so much for listening to me this evening.
Valora, thank you so very much. Let me clear the screen here. There we are, so folks can see the two of us. I was struck by a number of things. When we spoke in anticipation of this evening, and we were talking about your topic, and I said, "What's on your mind these days?" And this is really front of mind for you in a lot of ways. What strikes me is how unique it is, as compared to many of the messages that we all receive as parents, in that it is a hopeful, positive, optimistic, empowering look at how we can make a difference in the lives of our children. Not one that sort of takes the idea of risky conversations and makes it feel that there are punitive effects if we don't get it right. So you're telling us we can do it, and I greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So we have some questions here from our audience. Let me dive right in. Why is it that we find these conversations scary? Many of us have challenging and provocative conversations at work, with adult family, and other parts of life. What causes us nervousness? Why do we feel like the stakes are higher maybe in these conversations with our children?
You know, with our children, we're wanting to get it right. You know, we're all so deeply caring about our children. We want to get it right. And a lot of times, if you're having a conversation with another adult, you understand that you're both in a learning mode. But with children, we see ourselves as authority figures. We don't always have the answers. And so we're kind of afraid to tread that. We may come up on areas that we don't feel comfortable with and we don't know about. And so maybe we're not going to be that strong authority. And so, you know, we need to risk being human with our children. And, you know, depending on their age and their developmental level, maybe we need to share with them. I don't know. Let's find out. I think that sometimes we're afraid to do that with our kids.
And our kids can be forgiving, right? If we admit our own mistakes and that we're, you know, maybe we don't get it right the first time, try again.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. For caregivers who may not live with their child, how do we pick our moments to have these brave conversations if we don't get a lot of time, for example, with a child? You know, the writer says these can be tough conversations to have with limited time and reduced opportunity for follow-up. So any suggestion for those folks?
Yeah, and with limited time, you know, I think probably the more limited time, the more you want to listen. You know, I think sometimes when you're living with kids, we're constantly talking to them and giving them instructions and telling them to do this, not being with your child all the time. And I find this with nieces and nephews that I'm not with all the time. In some ways, I listen to them more because I need to find out, I need to fill in a lot of blanks for myself. So I think if we listen to children they're going to start sharing their experiences. They'll start sharing what they're thinking about. They'll start sharing questions that they have. And the more that we shut our mouth and open our ears, I think things will naturally evolve and opportunities to, a brave conversation isn't an hour conversation. It isn't a 45-minute webinar. Sometimes it's 2 minutes, right?
Wonderful. That's wonderful. What do you recommend if in a multi-parent household, for example, what do you recommend if one parent does not support these sort of brave conversations with a child? Waiting to do them in private might not capture the teachable moment.
Sometimes it's unavoidable having, sometimes it's the child that's going to lead, not the parents, and the parents maybe not agreeing on things. So, for example, if you're in the grocery store in that moment, you got to say something. So, you can start thinking right now what you might say in a situation like that. And also, even without, if there's parental disagreement about how to handle things, you still have the opportunities to choose books that children are reading. You have the opportunity to choose films that children are watching. You have the opportunity to take your child to community events. You have the opportunity to take your child to the museum. I've been to your museum. If I come to your museum, I'm going to encounter things that I'm unfamiliar with. So there's lots of ways to introduce your child to ideas of difference, ideas of having empathy. Lots of ways to do it nowadays.
That's wonderful. For slightly older children, perhaps, how can we as caregivers explain the poor behavior of other adults, those in the media or maybe those in our own lives and circles who are not good at expressing empathy?
Yeah, and I think that's where we can, again, express our values. In our family, we don't yell at each other the way they seem to be doing on TV. In our family, we don't interrupt each other constantly the way they seem to be doing on television. So you can express your values about things that kids are seeing all the time.
Mm. That's wonderful and very useful. One of our audience members asked if you have any particular children's book recommendations for young children ages birth to 5 years.
In the material that I've provided you in the follow-up, there is a list of children's books. But I also encourage you, if you Google children's books about disability, there's so much literature that's out there today. Also, just as museums are powerful learning tools, libraries are powerful learning tools as well. And so even though I am providing you a few examples of books, it's easy to find books at your local library or bookstore. So there's lots of materials out there, but I have started you off with a few in the handout that I've provided you.
That's fantastic. Well, our question asker happens to be a librarian, so shout out to her for making sure she's expanding the collection in wonderful ways. Valora, you said that silence teaches fear. So could we think of these brave conversations as a way of modeling for our children so that they are able and inspired to have their own brave conversations when we're not around, and how might that play out for them?
Absolutely. That goes back to what the rabbi said. Who's going to stand up for me if I don't stand up for myself? But yet, if I'm only thinking about myself, then who am I? So, and I'm going to say this in the context of children of color, but it could be any child. It's not unusual for a very young child of color to have people say disrespectful things to them that they don't know how to process. And I think this is one reason why the research so clearly shows that parents of color are more having these conversations. Because if you're listening to your child, they're going to come home and say these experiences. Johnny said, my lunch was weird because it's a food that they're not familiar with, or, Susie said that your mom wears funny clothes, this kind of thing. So that, by teaching children words, giving them vocabulary, because you say to your child, you're arming your child. When you send your child of color out into the world, you are arming your child with words and responses so that they can have a strong sense of self, so that they can be resilient. People have been doing this for 200 years. Okay, how do you prepare your child to face a world that is not always pleasant for you? And you got to start doing this at a young age, sadly. So I think that it does, by being brave yourself, is helping your children learn to be brave.
Mm, wonderful. What if a child is resistant to these brave conversations? Should we plow ahead? Don't force it. Does that mean the time is not right or the topic is too challenging? How can we temper ourselves?
Well, I think if we're leading with listening,
Mm,
the child is going to bring up things that they're curious about, that they're wondering about, that they heard, that they saw. So I think that breaks down the resistance, because you're responding to them in that way. So I think that's one way, that you're not just going to sit around one day and say to your 4-year-old, I was thinking about race. I want to talk to you about race. That's not what we're doing, right?
yeah, indeed. Laura, how might this topic translate to environments outside the home? Educators, a place like the Discovery Museum, where we're in contact. We have so many staff members who interact with visitors and families every day. How can we help advance the cause of brave conversations when we are not the parent?
Mhm. Oh, so many ways that you are doing this. You well know the answer to this question. There are so many ways that you do this. First of all, you're providing a rich array of multicultural materials that children can see, hear, touch, interact with. And so talk about using vocabulary as a way of building children's ability to take the perspective of others. There's so many things that one encounters in a museum that requires perspective taking. So I think that great museums like yours do this almost naturally. Although obviously there's a lot of expertise that goes into doing that. You have materials written and unwritten. You have things on the wall that families read, or that your museum guides read with children or with families when they're coming. So there's so many ways that you provide opportunities for people to take the perspective of others, and also to have those mirrors and those windows, lots of that in a museum setting.
It's great, and it sounds like a lot of that would work in a classroom too for the educators that are.
Absolutely. Not just traditional school classrooms, but also summer camp, art camp, so many group experiences that children have. I mean, overnight camp, when kids start going to overnight camp, tons of opportunities to help them learn how to take the perspective of others and consider the impact of their behavior and the reactions they're getting from other people as a result of what they say or do.
Mm, fantastic. I have one more question for you tonight. We see so many examples of parents trying to prevent their kids and others from being exposed to information that represents values that are different from their own. How do we help parents talk to kids about assessing those values and coming to their own conclusions? In other words, to become discerning.
Yeah, everything we've been talking about is critical thinking. You know, everything we've been talking about really has a foundation of supporting your child as a critical thinker. And so that, as we're listening to people, as children are sharing their experiences, as they are remarking on what they're seeing and hearing in the world, I think it's pretty impossible for your children not to be exposed to things and values that may be different from your own. If your child is in any kind of group setting whatsoever, they're going to hear another child. So forget about TV, internet, and all of that, which are tremendous influences on even young children. But if they're interacting with almost anyone in a group setting, they're going to ultimately come into contact with something different than you may prefer. And again, that gives you the opportunity to say, without being judgmental, how we do things in this classroom, how we do things in our home, without being judgmental. And so I think it's virtually impossible to protect your children from coming across messages other than the ones you might want them to receive.
Mm, mm. And we want our
This is a
children.
really this is an important beginning conversation, this webinar today. So I hope people really will dig deeper and that we really create an army of parents that are just strong and brave and having these conversations so that we can create an army of children that are just so resilient and so ready to be responsive to others and having empathy toward others. Thank you for inviting me tonight.
Thank you so very much, Valora, Dr. Valora Washington. We will follow up the resources that you have prepared. We will be sending out an email actually to everyone. So we'll have that in hand and adding in anything else that came up during the talk tonight that we can reference. Likewise, there will be a survey going out to all of you in the audience. We invite you to just take a moment, if you would, and give us your feedback so that we can continue to present topics and formats that are working for you and helping you and supporting you and your family. Thank you very much for joining us for the Discovery Museum Speaker Series. We really look forward to seeing you next time. Good night.